Welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast with TJ and Sonny.
Hello and welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. My name is TJ McConahay and I am live from the Expo Center at the National Youth Workers Convention in Tampa Bay, Florida. And this has been a very amazing trip. And right now we are actually at the CIY booth, which I am convinced is the coolest booth here in Tampa. It is legit. These guys are awesome. We're going to hear a little bit more from CIY later in this podcast. But as of right now, I'm joined by my wonderful, beautiful, amazing wife and best friend, Britt McConahay. Brittany, what's some of the takeaways so far from the National Youth Workers Convention that you are hyped about?
Well, I've got a couple takeaways, but I thought we should start with our origin story down here in Tampa Bay.
Ooh, I love the origin stories.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, we got down here. We didn't sleep at all on the red-eye flight because we decided to watch Netflix documentaries instead. So we got here pretty tired, and then we found out once we got to the airport that our hotel didn't have a shuttle bus. So yes. We decided, because we're too cheap to do Uber, that we would walk 4 miles with all of our luggage.
$25 for Uber.
It's ridiculous. It was ridiculous. So we decided to walk 4 miles with our luggage.
Yes.
With your 60-pound backpack with all your camera gear.
Yes. It was nuts. And I can tell you this, nobody walks in Tampa. We learned this. Like from the Northwest, literally people walk everywhere. It's a way of life.
Even in the rain.
Yes.
Well, it's always raining.
Here, there's nobody walking.
No.
There's nobody walking.
We walked 4 miles. We did not see a single soul.
Yes.
And there were some parts that didn't have sidewalks either, so we were trekking through the tall grasses of Tampa.
Yeah, they got weird, crunchy grass here. But anyway.
It was all right because we did stop halfway for a candy bar break.
Yes, we got a candy bar break, and then we finally found refuge in Chick-fil-A.
Yes, we spent a long time in the air conditioning at Chick-fil-A.
Yes, it was a pretty dang cool time, and we didn't want to leave. We didn't want to finish the walk after we were there, so it was cool. But after we got here, after we trekked in, what happened?
We've been at the convention now for 3 days, and it's been awesome. I love it. It's like a giant 3,000-person youth group. And it's exactly what a youth ministry fanatic needs, wants, and loves. It's just been awesome in every way. This is my first time, obviously, and some of these people have been coming for 40, 50 years.
Yes.
There's like gray-haired people. Okay, I have gray hair already, and I'm 30. I'm 33. Wait a minute. No, but there's like legit old people that are in the convention hall playing all these games with us, doing all these dances, getting candy thrown at them. And for me, it just legitimizes like what we do as youth workers, because sometimes it feels like a weird job.
Yeah.
But
it is a weird job.
Yeah, it feels like when I tell my friends or when I tell people that I meet, oh, my husband is a youth minister. It just feels weird. It feels like
when you say that, do you just kind of like bow your head in shame?
Sometimes I don't say what you do. Sometimes I just say he works with teens because I feel embarrassed. But here we are surrounded by thousands of other people who do this work, and you realize that you're not alone at all. In fact, you're not even close.
Join the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. And when you subscribe to this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating. We desperately need your approval.
All right, so right now I am joined by Lane from CIY. CIY has been gracious to us in our podcast and has allowed us to use their floor space to do this live podcast. So we kind of want to hear from Lane. What is CIY? We're kind of out of Seattle area, so CIY has a little bit of presence up there, but it's not as huge.
Yep.
So maybe for people who don't know, what is CIY and what do you do there?
So CIY's been around for about 50 years, just serving youth ministries in that time. We say that we call students to Christ and to lives of kingdom work through the local church. So that's our heartbeat. We get to work with everything from preteen students to middle school students to high school students to college-age students through the missions trips. But we do conferences and events for students all over the world. There's a common misconception, actually, that CIY is an events organization. It is not. It is a calling students to kingdom work organization. And right now, events seem to work, and so we use events. But If that ever isn't the case, if events ever don't work, then we'll do something else. We'll find something else that does. So we're not. That's what we do the most of right now, but it's not what we're tied to.
Yeah.
We just want to serve and equip youth pastors and youth ministries as best we can.
Awesome. And so in your role at CIY, what do you spend your days doing?
So I'm the director of Move. So
Okay.
Move is our high school summer conference.
All right.
So we'll in about a 10-week window of this summer, from June to August, we'll do 36 weeks of Move during the summer, all over the country and in Ireland as well.
Whoa.
Which is super rad.
Yeah.
So we're really fortunate to be able to do that. And so my role is specifically, I'm the director of the Move program. Mm-hmm. So I get to oversee our team that puts that together, and our team that connects with our roughly 1,200 churches that we get to work with annually to be able to serve their youth ministries. So on a day-to-day, you'll find me anywhere from just trying to reach out and connect to youth pastors that we've developed relationships with, figure out what's the best way that we can serve them, how can we be like the most effective tool in their ministry toolbox, I guess, if you will, and then overseeing and encouraging and hopefully raising the capacity of the individuals on our Move team. That's my joy. I get to do that.
That's awesome. So if somebody's out there thinking, hey, I'd like to get involved with CIY, maybe I'd like to come to maybe one of the conferences, I would like to, how can they do that?
So if you got preteens, 4th through 6th graders that you're like, man, we need a really great weekend event for them. Middle schoolers, we need a really great weekend event for middle schoolers in the middle of the year, winter, spring, something like that, a really great shot in the arm in our school year. If you've got middle schoolers that you want a great summer event for, an amazing camp, Age Intentional is going to call your students to a life of discipleship beyond the event. Same with your high school students. You want to go a 5-day summer event, all over the United States, or heck, join us in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get involved, if you want to do something like that, CIY.com is the way to go. That's ChristinYouth.com. You can head there. You can email me, lane.moss @CIY.com, and I would love to talk with you about what it would look like for us to be able to serve and equip the youth ministry, however that looks for you, right? So we say all the time at CIY, we're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. We want to serve the church as best we can.
All right, I'm here with Derry Prenkert. Am I saying that right?
You said it right.
I said it right. There it is. I only know how to say his name right because I've listened to his podcast, My Third Decade, which is an awesome podcast about longevity in youth ministry and all sorts of other topics. They don't. It started there, but you guys talk about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're just going around grabbing different youth workers here and asking them, tell us your tale from the Fringe, time in your ministry career where you experienced a Fringe kid and all of their fringiness. So,
Yeah, so when you say that, TJ, my podcast is about longevity. My story is being able to be in ministry for 20 plus years. And I go back to 2003 when Brad walked into my youth group and he was brought by a friend. Didn't know at the time until I took him out to dinner later, and he walked through, and I'll never forget him telling me, like, this kind of rough kid. Well, I should stop. He farted in the middle of the message purposely to get attention to himself. Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, he did it again accidentally. These were also the guys that when the service was done and if we took communion, they would sit at the side and eat all the leftover bread. And they were just like great. But Brad, then I took him to dinner at Pat's Chicago Dogs. And I'll never forget him looking up at me and said, you know what the worst thing in the world is? Waiting for your dad, who you know is an alcoholic, on your front porch when you're 5 years old, and he never shows up. You know what you start doing? Is you just don't go out and sit out on the porch. And Brad was a kid from an incredibly just dysfunctional, broken home who was brilliant. The fun part is Brad, at that point, I just decided, my wife and I both said, we're going to give this guy a little bit of unprecedented access into our home. I want to do it for all, but this is one that we're going to do this with. And Brad is now 34 years old and a father of 3 and the most kick A. Can I say that? I won't go all the way.
Well, it's the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. You can say the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I might get fired. He's the most kick A youth pastor I know.
That's awesome.
And he is investing in others' lives. And the kind of roundabout story, too, in that was one late night, he's in my office after programming about 2 hours later, and I'm just dead tired. And I just said, guys, let's just go home. And we were laughing. We were doing other things. And Brad stopped and he said, Derry, you don't get it. This is home. And I think there's a principle in that's the trick. And I come from a very affluent, healthy families. I think the key, if there's anybody out there that's like me, where that fringe kid, especially from the dysfunctional home, is understanding, yes, I got to partner with parents, but how do we set up a culture that is the parent to the kid that is parentless? And that's been my fringe story that I try to repeat over and over again.
Yeah, I was thinking about something I heard Chap Clark say, talking about the 5-to-1 ratio.
Yep.
That is so important for fringe kids. That's it.
Yes.
Because me, I'm probably just a lot like a Brad in that same way. Came from a broken home, and then the church just kind of adopted me. And there was and it wasn't just one family. There was 4 families that I could just walk through their door, and they would just love me and let me be there. And so to hear that the church is still doing that, yes, one of the things we talk about at this conference, and we hear it over and over again, is how do we partner with parents? How do we get parents involved? And whenever I hear that, there's something that's always I don't know if that would have ever reached me.
Exactly.
And so there has to be a youth ministry in its purest form where we're just going after students of all kinds. And so I love that happens. And 34-year-old Brad, hopefully you listen to this, or you listen to him tell you about Derry, talk about you in that way. It's pretty cool.
It's awesome, man. Love what you're doing, man.
Hey, thanks.
Keep reaching out to the fringe.
Yep.
Everybody, keep doing it.
All right. Awesome, man.
Yep.
Hey.
You're still listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.
All right, I am joined by Tim Cryer. Not Sire.
What's up?
It's not Sire. It's
Cryer.
It's Cryer. Okay.
Yeah,
You
like
must
a
had
baby.
You must have had a great middle school.
It's the best. My kids are now the recipient of all the jokes that they haven't changed.
Yeah, I imagine they haven't changed, and I imagine it's pretty low-hanging fruit. All right, so Tim, you've been on our show before. We've talked. This is our first time actually meeting in public. We're about to go to lunch together, but I wanted to hear from you real quick because we're live here, and we might as well. Maybe give me just a little bit of spiel of what you guys do real quick.
Yep. So Treehouse, like you said, we're on a mission to end hopelessness among teens. And really in the church realm, what we do is partner with churches to start to address some of the mental health needs of teens. And so we provide a free assessment where teens can assess their teens, our churches can assess their teens. And then from there, we have kind of a number of options to implement programming to training to start to resource churches.
Yeah, and if I remember right, you guys kind of just set up groups, right? Like within churches.
Yep.
On
So we really focus on helping develop support groups that serve your kids and the community, and really start to give kids a safe place to talk about what's going on.
That's awesome. The Treehouse is one of our favorite. On the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast, they exist in a very similar space to where we exist.
Yeah.
And so we love them, and we love Tim. But Tim, tell me your tale from the Fringe.
All right, so I had Jessica over to our house the other day. She's in her 30s, and she has 2 kids. And we, through probably a year of living with us, helped her get into an apartment, her and her kids. And then that was amazing. So amazing to see her get a job. She got her GED. She got into a place where she could afford, and her kids had some stability for the first time in probably 5 years. And then we went to her daughter's birthday party, and probably 6 months into living alone, found out she was pregnant again, which in that moment, you are caught between the middle of celebrating for them because they're happy, and also mourning because you realize they're barely making it, and their kids, there's going to be suffering that happens for those kids and for that family, because suddenly the dollars that were barely supporting 2 are now supporting 3 kids. So we kind of went through that heartache and also celebrating with her at the same time. Anyways, she came over to our house the other day. She's probably weeks away from giving birth. and she didn't have FMLA. She didn't have any kind of ways to support. And so through all this, I mean, just anxiety in life situations I have no context for. But I continue to, so one of the things we talk about are like the truths, right? What you're lovable, capable, worthwhile. You're not alone in love without strings, and you have a future. And so just continuing to remind her of those things, and that Jesus is there with her in that, and trying to financially as best we can support her. But so she's about to give birth to her third child with two different dads in the picture, but not helping financially. And she's I don't know how she's going to make it, but just this reality of that's what it's like to be in the trenches. It's not always pretty, but the thing I struggle with is we get to the end and we see the end result and we say, well, I have no compassion for that person because they should have used protection or they shouldn't be sleeping around. And just the reality of walking this through her and seeing how stressful her life is and how alone she is. And so sometimes sleeping with another person is the only respite that she knows how to cope with her situation. And so it's just so much more complicated than I think. To be Jesus in that situation is to not say, well, every decision you've made is okay, but just to continue reminding that they are loved, they have value, that they still have a purpose and a future, and to have compassion. You know, I don't need to solve all her problems, but I need to have compassion. And for other people who are in similar situations, I think compassion is where Jesus really meets people. So anyways.
I think that sometimes we get stuck between empathy and sympathy, right? Like, it's easy to empathize when we've been there. It's hard to sympathize because that usually means that we haven't been there. And so, but I think what you're doing there is good, and it's the long haul. We talk about that. Sonny and I talk about all the time. Is that this is not 3-week program and you're done. That it takes a long time to do what we're supposed to do in this thing. So, but anyway, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks, CJ.
Awesome. And now I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, the sticker face legend, Frank Gil. 50 Minutes with Frank on the DYM podcast network. He's killing it in so many ways. He's got breakout sessions here at the National Youth Workers Convention. Have you done yours yet, or are you still going to do yours?
I've done my podcast already.
Okay.
I did a live show. I did it yesterday. It was super fun. Today I'm doing a breakout with Carl Romeus on race and student ministry. It's going to be a good one. And then tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, I'm doing a breakout on how to turn your youth group into a late night talk show.
That's right. Super fun. That's right. And if you guys don't know, Frank has authored what is it?
It's called Youth Group Tonight.
Youth Group Tonight, yes. So it's like the Tonight Show for youth group.
Exactly.
It takes some prep, but it is an amazing resource. Yeah. It is really, really amazing resource. So we've had Frank on the show before. He's familiar with the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. But what we're just asking again is Tale from the Fringe, a time in which you dealt with a kid or a family who was on the fringe of society. Maybe it was yourself. Maybe it was back in the day when you were a fringe kid. Especially as you're preparing now to do this not podcast, but your breakout on race. Yeah. You're dealing with fringe stuff constantly, Frank. So tell me your tale from the fringe.
I mean, I'll share one from that kind of perspective because there's a story that comes to my mind. There was a young lady in my last youth group when I was in Arkansas. Okay. So we're about to talk a story about race, and I was in Arkansas. So this is already gonna get a little muddy in a second. But I was in Arkansas, and there's a young lady. Her name is Mary. She was maybe a sophomore in my youth group at the time. She's biracial. She's half black and half white. But she was adopted by a white family in our church. She was adopted as a baby. So sweet girl, kind of grew up in the church, that kind of stuff. We go on a missions trip with me and about maybe a dozen kids to Costa Rica. And as a lot of times happen, this young lady fell in love with another boy on the missions trip because romance always happens on missions trips. There's a white kid, a pretty good kid, good family, whatever. They start are interested in dating. They get back, and then the parents say, "You have to break up with her. Our family doesn't do that." Oh, I know, and she, that was That's probably the first time she's dealt with some kind of like passive racism, even though I would probably say it's not passive. It's pretty, it's pretty straight up racist. Yeah. But she came to me and she was bawling her eyes out, and she was just like Frank, like I thought like in Christ there's neither Jew nor Greek, men or women, slave or free, and I was like, that is true in Christ, but there are people in Christ who don't get it, and who are still kind of chained to old bad ways of thinking. And so as a person who is ethnically ambiguous, maybe people don't know what race or ethnicity I am, and as a person who's married to a white woman, having these conversations of being in a multiracial relationship and being someone who makes a lot of people uncomfortable just because of the way I look like, I was able to comfort her, and there was a real moment where like she could have walked away from her faith because she was so hurt that Christians showed her that kind of racism, and I just kind of painted a picture that Christ is a God who loves diversity, who sees beauty in diversity, but sometimes his Christians don't get it, and to this, so praise God, she didn't walk away. She stayed in there through tears and awkwardness, and the fun ending to that story is not to the same guy, but to a different brother. I'm officiating her wedding in about a month. So that's our relationship is really close because we walked through that together, and I was able to help her kind of see that there's hope on the other side, even though when other people hurt you in this process.
I mean, so I got a couple comments and then some follow questions. First of all, that's just tragic.
Yeah.
It's tragic that's a reality. And I think that sometimes when you're away from it, or you're just not, you're white.
Yeah.
You just don't experience it. It's a different experience that you're going through. And someone I've worked with so many people of color over my years. My last call was in Woodburn, Oregon, which was 65% Hispanic. I learned how to understand and speak a little bit of Spanish, in those moments. But I realized in those moments that I thought, man, before I walked into that setting, I thought racism was over. You know what I mean? Because I just didn't.
A lot of people feel that way.
Well, and in my family and everything, it's like, oh, come on, it's not the '60s anymore.
Exactly.
And then just walking with them through similar stories on race and different things that were going on, and you realize they have a different experience in life. They just do. And so my follow up with that is, how much in your life, Frank, has race affected your career, your ministry? I mean, is it on a day-to-day basis that you feel that there's some racial tension, or is it less than that, more than that? Just so
that's a really good question. I'll say this: when I was first starting out, I remember preaching in the main service of my church, and I walked off stage. And when you preach in the main service as a youth pastor, people are extra nice to you because you're not the senior pastor. And a lot of people were like greeting me, saying really nice things. But there was one gentleman who, for all intents and purposes, was really cool with me. He was a deacon in our church. The first thing he said to me when I got off stage was, "Will you ever shave your beard off? You look really Muslim, and you won't make it as a pastor if you keep looking Muslim." And to him, he thought he was giving me just good advice. To me, I'm like, so you're saying the longevity of my ministry is if I shave my beard? Now my branding is my beard.
I know. I was just thinking that, man. Thinking that. Did you do that on purpose?
Not on purpose. That's not why I did it. But honestly, it's like this. One thing that I think people of color to the ministry are aware of, if they have a vocabulary for this or not, I'm not sure, but I think that everyone would agree is that there's this double consciousness where you are aware of what people think about you, and you're aware of who you are. And so you're constantly being reminded of, like, when you walk into a room, you're not just walking in a room, you're walking in the room as a person of color, and that may cause people to act a little differently, react. People say different kinds of jokes when you walk in. People might respond to things differently, and oftentimes people of color are treated as a token when they're in predominantly white spaces. And I think I wrote an article about this on the youth specialties. It's just as a people of color, like, we're going to serve in predominantly white churches, a lot of churches that have predominantly white churches. They want diversity, so those are hiring youth workers, worship leaders of color. But you as a youth worker or whoever has to be conscious of the fact that, like, when people see me, they're not just seeing a worship leader or a youth pastor. They're seeing a youth pastor of color, and they're going to be asking these questions. Do I want my child under that teaching? Do I want my child in that? Sometimes there's in the church I'm at now, that's not a question. No one's worried about that. But there are other churches I have been in where even if I walked in as a camp speaker, they're like, oh, this is a speaker of color. They're processing things differently. And so as a youth worker of color, I'm aware of what I believe who I am, but I'm also aware of what people are thinking of who I am. So that might affect how I dress when I walk into certain places. That might affect my speech. And I think the more I'm getting more comfortable, no pun intended, in my skin of who I am, I start trying to let go of that double consciousness and say, if someone's not going to like me because of the color of my skin, we're not going to solve this in our hour engagement, right? But my hope is that when I walk into a space, someone might see me as a brown person with a beard. I hope I leave as them seeing me as this is a brother in Christ who is proficient in what they do, but loves Jesus a lot and wants to spread that good news to other people. I hope that's the interactions I have with people. But you can't always control that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I do know what you're saying on that stuff. Just you can't control people's perceptions on that, and it's hard because you're kind of in a double situation, right? Because youth workers walk around with people not really understanding, you know?
Right.
I mean, we live in I had Marco on the show, and he talked about how we're in the most misunderstood profession of all time.
100%.
And so you kind of have that, you doubled up on that. Is that
Doubling down.
Yes. I mean, especially going to churches, you're predominantly white, so you kind of already have a misunderstanding built into it, and then you're a youth worker on top of that. I mean, man, you must be just viewed as the man of mystery everywhere you go, you know?
I think when I walked into a new space, like when I went to my church 4 years ago, I'm just going to build as much relationships as possible so I can have that relational equity to tear down any kind of preconceived notions. And honestly, because I've been able to build that relational equity, I've given freedom to my white brothers and sisters to ask some of their harder questions about maybe their presuppositions or assumptions about people of color, or questions of why people of color are so focused on certain issues that white people are not focused on. And those relationships have been able to pull the guard down so that we can just be as brothers and sisters in Christ, pastors, ministers, and all that stuff. And so there's this double consciousness that a lot of youth workers of color are considering and thinking about. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that case. Hopefully one day, especially when we're in glory, this is a non-issue and no one's concerned about the color of our skin anymore.
Yeah.
But it is what it is right now.
I understand. I went to a breakout years and years and years ago by a guy named John Perkins. You know that name?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so John Perkins.
John Perkins.
Yeah, John Perkins.
Oh, I know who he is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a Southern Baptist preacher.
He's the man.
He's the man. And he talks on this stuff a lot.
Yes.
That's kind of his whole ministry.
Yes.
And one of the things that he said, and he might have been quoting somebody else on this, but he said the most, what is it? He said the most
segregated.
Yes, there you go.
That's actually MLK quote.
It's MLK
the
quote.
most segregated time of the week is a Sunday morning service.
And I feel like that's still true. You know?
I mean, my church is a multi-ethnic church. It's a desire to be a multi-ethnic church, multi-site church. And we're in Milwaukee, which statistically is considered the most segregated city in America to this day.
Okay.
And we are doing our very best to have multi-ethnic worship services on Sunday morning, and it's an uphill battle. It's difficult, and it's just more people are comfortable. You know, people of color tend to worship with other people of color. People who are white tend to worship with other people who are white. But we are slowly getting there, and we have a campus in our ministry, in our church, that we do see that a beautiful diversity. But you have to be intentional. I think the best place in our culture right now to see that kind of diversity is in our student ministries.
Yeah,
because students aren't, there are prejudiced students and racist students, but it's much easier to get students to say, yeah, racism is dumb, and to engage in worship next to a person of color or a person that's white than it is sometimes in our Sunday morning adult services. So student ministry could be laying on the foundation and the groundwork for a very beautiful place in the church one day.
Yeah, and I would even say that a little bit about you, Frank. You and Carl, you're here and you guys are having this breakout and you're having these discussions, especially in a country right now where these discussions and things are happening. Just so much divisiveness being said on those stuff. So I appreciate you guys being on the front line of that and leading our church to a better spot and a healthier spot. And hopefully, 50 years from now, when people are looking at church, they're going to look at that quote by MLK and say, I don't feel like that's true anymore. And that would be awesome. So thank you, Frank Gil. Go listen to his podcast, download his resources on DYM. Britt just got something on DYM, so she's a pup. So we're in the family now too, a little bit over here.
That's awesome.
So 15 minutes with Frank. All right, well, it's been super fun here at the National Youth Workers Convention, hang out at the CIY booth. It's been so fun. I love that I've gotten to do it. It is awesome. It is great. It is wonderful.
Wow. Can you expound on that a little more, TJ?
It is so cool. It's the greatest. I can't explain it even more than any of the words I've already explained.
Yeah, for someone who communicates for a living, that was tough.
That was tough. That was a really, really clunky ending.
But really, that was a fun episode, and it's been great to meet all these people in real life and not just on social media.
Yeah, that has been really, really cool. We look forward to being with you guys next week. This is the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.
All right, let's go get some lunch.
Thank you for listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. Don't believe anything my dad